Hey everyone, welcome to MuseScore Week 2, Part 2. This video is assuming that you've already entered the notes of Little Darlin. Again, I've entered them just past letter C since it covers all of the skills we need. You've hopefully done the entire piece at this point and are just going to be working on things like articulations and rehearsal markings and the sign and all of those things. So the notes should already be in place before you start this video so that you can follow along. Okay, assuming you've done that, let's go switch into our software. All right, so here what we're seeing is we're seeing the Little Darlin piece all correctly entered up through the B. I think it's correct at least. And it's got things like our title. It's got the subtitle, which we're not going to need. It's got the composer. And I've already told you I don't like that little composer heading. It's got a tempo marking, but it's not accurate. You may remember that from the setup video. It needs more information. So first off, let's get rid of the subtitle. This is easy. Click it, hit delete. Done. If you're on a PC, it might be backspace, but it's the same concept. Just do that. The tempo marking is also quite simple. Double click it, and then we can just edit the text by adding a hyphen, which is right next to the 0 key, typing 88, and then I use escape to get out of any text box. Okay? So we're good to go there. If we click this and then switch to our properties panel, you have options of changing the tempo. So I could mess with it here to tell it how fast I wanted it to play back. I'm fine with it being at 80, so I'm just going to leave that checked. All right. Next up, we've got multi-measure rests. Now, turns out this has already been done for us. We just can't see it yet. So let's come back to this towards the end of the video. All right, moving on. We have a rehearsal marking, a sign, a repeat, dynamic marking, in this case piano, and then lots of articulations. So there's a lot going on in this immediate area. Let's tackle them one by one. Let's start with repeats. So repeats are pretty straight ahead. Simply find the repeat panel, open it up, and that's what we're going to need right there. Click on the bar line you want it on. I missed. Click on the bar line you want it on, click your repeat, and you're good to go. Now in jazz notation, we often put these little flags on the top and bottom, and the reason is because most jazz parts are being read in lower light conditions. We play in a lot of clubs. Classical music is often on symphony hall stages and fancy concert halls that are well lit. That's not the case for us jazz guys. So if you want that flag style, while clicking your repeat sign, hit properties, and you'll see there's a flagged style right here. It doesn't look exactly the same, but I think it looks pretty good, so we can keep it. While we're on the topic of repeats, we see right after this high C natural right there, we have a backwards repeat. That's the other half of this, and a long first ending. So what we're going to want to do to create that is select that measure region, and then while we're in our repeats palette area, we're going to click our first ending, and that's going to add that long bracket. Now we can click the bar line just like we did before, and we can click our backwards repeat this time to get the other half of that particular thing. For now, don't worry about the fact that it just jumped to another line. We can put all those things in the right space soon. Okay, what else do we need to do? Well, we need a rehearsal marking. Rehearsal markings are a text item. So here's where I have my rehearsal marking. And I can click in any note within the measure I want to put a rehearsal marking on and click the rehearsal mark. And it just assumes that you're going to want the A there. Now, sometimes it doesn't behave the way you want it, and you can double click and you can edit the text. But for now, it's doing what we like. We'll see what happens when we come to this next one. In fact, why don't we do that next? Click that E there. Same thing. We got our letter B. So we're good to go. There are times when MuseScore doesn't seem to want to play along. I'm not 100% sure why it makes the decisions it makes, but I've noticed that if I've entered notes in before I do all of this and I select an actual note, then I usually get the results I want if I want letters. Interestingly enough, if I change them to numbers, they will number in a logical way too. So if I had written a 5 in that bar, let's think about why. That's the 5th measure right there. Then it will assume I want measure numbers, and it'll figure out the math and automatically put measure numbers in here for me. If I put a 1 in there, well, that's the 5th measure, so it assumes that I'm just saying that's the first marking, that'll be the second, so this will be a 2. It's smart enough generally to know what you want. As with everything, though, under properties, there's things I can auto-place, I can do some different stuff to make all of this work properly. Okay, let's do our last rehearsal marking that's relevant to the section we're in. We'll get our C there. All right. So continuing on. Next up, we've got a dynamic marking. Well, dynamic markings are unsurprisingly under dynamics. So if I click on the rest, or I guess it's lined up with the note or the rest, I'll leave it up to you. I'm going to go ahead and say it's lined up with the note. I click the note, click the piano marking, and I've got it. Then we're good to go. So most of this so far is pretty easy. You just select what you want to mess with, find the correct palette, in this case dynamics, and then click what you need. Let's get our decrescendo in there while we're still on dynamics. That crosses about 2 bars. It actually is the length of these 2 notes. So I'm going to go ahead and click those 2 notes, hit decrescendo, and I'm done. If for any reason it wasn't the length I wanted, I can click it and I can drag to whatever I need. So very easy to make adjustments. Okay, we can also do our crescendo the same way. The crescendo happens along the last 4 notes here and the whole note. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of that. Now, he wrote 2 crescendos. I really think 1 will do the job, so I'm going to make the choice to just do 1 for the whole time. If you wanted to do both separately, you could very easily select the first 4 notes and add it, and then select the whole note and add it to replicate the style here. I personally think this looks better, so I'm going to keep it that way. Articulations. Articulations are note assigned, and you can actually do these while you're entering your notes, and I bet some of you even already figured this out in advance. They're all hidden up here. If I hold the mouse over top of one of these, you're going to see a little tool text pops up. So it says Marcato, and it has this little icon for a Shift O. So if I can remember Shift O, I can use that keystroke to enter this instead of going up to the panel. But we don't need Marcatos. What we do need are accents, which is Shift V. We need tenuto markings, which is Shift N. And we need staccato markings, which is Shift S. Finally, one we can remember, right? Shift S should be easy. Unfortunately, accent is a V, and tenuto is an N, so we're just going to have to remember those. So now that we know them, I can come to my note, and I can come up here and click. I can click both of those things to create the articulation, or I can hit Shift N and V, Shift N and Shift V to add them. I can do the same thing by clicking the next 4 notes. Hold all those, hit Shift S, and I've got my staccatos, and then we have a tenuto marking, which we learned with Shift N. So I'm using the keyboard shortcuts because it's way faster. I'm going to recommend you do the same. It's going to save you a lot of time. But until you get good with them, know that you can always just look up here and figure out what the keystroke is. All right, what else do we have? Well, we've got a lot of it already, and we're really flying through this. We've got a slur marking that covers 3 notes. We've got a slur marking that covers 2 notes. Okay, so let's start with the one that only is on 2 notes. That's an easier one to do. Click the first note in any grouping that's only 2 and simply hit S. Done, looks good. We need a tenuto marking, so Shift N on that note, and we're good. Now we have one that hits 3 notes. When it's 3 notes, you want to select the first note, hold Shift and select the last note to get a selection box. And now when I hit slur, it's going to cover all the notes. So we can do that again in the first ending. We're going to hit that at the first note, and we're going to go to the last note here. Now if you want to match the part, he only goes that far. So I can hit S there, and it looks just like the score. I personally think that looks ugly. So I'm going to grab this last box, and I'm going to drag it over to the other note, because that's the way modern composers write things. I think this looks better. You probably do too. So that's how I would fix it, and I have no problem if you want to fix it. It's more correct to do it that way. Same thing with the E sharp. I'm going to go to the last note of the slur because I think it looks better, and hit S for the whole thing. If you'd prefer to perfectly match the part, you can go to the C instead. What else do we have? We have the subtone marking, and we have a second ending. Let's get our second ending first. The second ending starts there. We have our repeat tool open. I simply click the ending, and we're good. If you want to match that long bar, which I personally don't, I don't think we need all that information. No, the second ending is all of this. It's everything after it. So it's kind of arbitrary that he wrote it to the C. I just like to keep it over the first measure and assume our readers know to go on. But to match it, I simply would have selected all 4 measures with the Shift key. We have our subtone. Let's get the slur in there first. Select the first and last note, hit S, and we're good. And then what I'm going to do after that is the subtone is text that looks like it's attached to the A. So let's go to our text tool. Text tool is right here. Our text tool allows us to enter, well, any default text that's already here, but it also has this staff and system text. Let's talk about the differences. System text is going to be put on every single part that you're generating. Well, right now we're only making 1 part, so it's really not a big issue. I could probably do this with either. But if I want to do like a big band score, this is a first alto part. It's actually part of 5 saxophone parts. It's also part of a big band, so there's also 4 trumpet parts, 4 trombone. There's a lot of other parts. If I had a marking that I just wanted to show up everywhere, I would use system text. Subtone is a technique that only saxophones do. So since it's only saxophones, I don't want this to appear on every part in a big band. So I'm going to go ahead and use staff text. For this example, it's not going to really make a difference, but it's a good practice to get into doing things the correct way right from the beginning. So staff text when it's only going to apply to one or just a few parts, system when you want it to apply to everything. Okay, so I've got my staff text. I'm going to go ahead and double click it there to add it, and then I double click it to edit it. We're going to change it to say subtone. And I hit escape to get back out, and it's great. Now there's a box around this, and of course I could have done it in all caps like that, I guess, if I wanted to. We can get the box if you want. I can click it, and then anytime I want to adjust the look or feel of something, I go to properties, and I should have a property in here that do something with this. Well, not initially, but under the More tab I do. There's a box around the text here. Click that, and there's my box. I'm not happy with the size of the box. It's kind of squished looking. I can add padding, which adds spacing between the words and the box text. So I went to 0.6. That looks pretty good. 0.5, somewhere in there is going to be nice. I'll go with 0.6. I can also change the thickness of the line, but I like the thin lines, so we're just going to keep that nice and small. I could add a corner radius. You got to get pretty large numbers before this starts to look like anything. But we're going to get to, let's go to 10 and see what happens. I'm starting to get a little bit of curvature on that. I could keep coming up as long as I wanted and really get that curve sounding good. I don't really care enough to worry about that one though, so we'll just go back to 0. So let's see, what are we missing? We don't have repeat signs yet. So, I'm sorry, we don't have the segnos and the codas and such. So the segno is attached to that first measure there. So I'm going to click in my first measure and click my sign. And MuseScore knows you want it at the beginning of the bar and likes to position it below the rehearsal markings. You could always drag these things to different spots if you wanted to, but its default looks fine to me. The coda sign is right before the first ending. I'm going to click in that measure and I'm going to hit to coda. Problem, it shows up at the beginning of the measure. Well, I have a couple options here. The reason it's doing that is because Neil Hefti used this symbol incorrectly. This symbol is supposed to be down here, and up here we're supposed to write the words to coda. Do you see how we have to coda right there? That's the correct one. And if I use the correct one, it shows up exactly like it's supposed to. So I'm going to recommend you use the correct one as well. If you really want to stick to the original coda symbol, you're going to have to drag it in position or add it on the bar after so it appears where you want. MuseScore wants you to use the correct term for this. And that's going to be more accurate. To add the coda symbol where it's appropriate for you, you just do the same thing, except this time you'll use this guy. Anything else? Let's see. I feel like we've got everything. We've added our tempo range. Oh, I am forgetting one last step, the multi-measure rest. So let's talk a little bit about multi-measure rests. MuseScore has actually already done this for us, but we can't see it. Turns out that's because we're looking at the score. The score is the master part that has all other parts on it. Now, in our example, we've only made an alto part, so that technically is everything, but there is a part, and the part is a separate page that has formatting that looks better for parts. This is a score formatting, which looks better when I have multiple parts on it. So how do we get there? Well, you may have already noticed this, but there's a button at the top that says Parts. If I click that, I get a special panel where I'm allowed to select parts I want to create and open them. Now we're looking at the actual alto saxophone part. The margin's a little bigger, the title of the instrument appears at the top of the page. Don't worry about the fact that it doesn't say first. Had I had multiple saxophones, it would have labeled them correctly. It put the multi-measure rests in. It even grouped up the ones I hadn't filled in. If you've followed along, you've probably filled in these notes and you're probably accurate and this is the right amount of measures. Okay, there's one final thing we need to do. Now that we're looking at the part, we see that the formatting on this is laid out very differently. The multi-measure rest gets an entire line. You know, this whole first ending is on one line together, ours is not. This turns out to actually be very easy to fix. So let's go ahead and learn how to do that now. We're going to open up our layout tab, and for our needs, we only need the down little system break arrow. I don't think we'll end up needing group measures, but if we do, I'll show you how it works. We'll definitely learn about this one later. So what we want to do is we want to click on any bar line that will end a line. So I'm going to click on that repeat, which actually technically starts the next line, but it's the same as ending that. And I click my system break, and now this is in the right spot, this is in the right spot, and it puts my sign off to the left, which is really where we want it. Okay, I can do the same thing at the end of that F sharp, so I'm going to click there, and we're good. Now, there is a shortcut for this. It's just the Enter key. So after our whole note, had that not been in the right place, I could have clicked the line and hit enter. Let's practice that on the repeat sign. I click the repeat sign, hit enter, and it automatically formats that correctly. And it turns out this next one we just got lucky and it's in the right spot. If I ever need to lock one into place and I'm worried about it moving around, I can always click and hit enter and it'll add the system break icon there, and now this won't move no matter what I do. All right, so if you've been following along, your part should actually look pretty darn good now because MuseScore's defaults are excellent. So everything should be nice and clean, it should be easy to read, and it should look pretty much like this, except you'll have your articulations more detailed in. Your job is to finish whatever's left, add any missing articulations, dynamic markings, those kinds of things. So anything you see like a dynamic marking, diminuendo is good. If you see a rallentando is a tempo marking you'll find right here. If I wanted to go over multiple notes, just like before, I select a region. Let's practice by putting in a rallentando right here. Oops, missed. I want to select the region of notes. I'll hit rallentando, and we're good to go. It appears above the staff. If I want it below the staff, select and hit. Oh, actually, that's right. This one doesn't do that. You can often hit the F key and it'll move it, but I forgot. MuseScore is picky about its dynamics. I have to go to properties, and I have to say I want it below. And now it looks just like it does over here. Okay. So that's everything. Enter the notes, enter your articulations, enter all the score markings, and then submit the project, and you're done for the week. Thanks, everybody. If you do get stuck, please send me an email. Ask for help. I can walk you through it by email, or I'd be happy to meet you at the computer lab and give you in-person instruction with this as well. Thanks all. Good luck with this. I hope it goes smoothly. Talk to you later.